When it comes to the horror anthology genre, the bar was set high by the first two Creepshow films. However, if we've learned anything from Hollywood, no good idea has ever gone unflogged to death. But despite a severe lack of masterminds at the helm, the truth about Creepshow 3 is that it's not that bad. Welcome one and all to It's Not That Bad, the podcast that looks for A grades in B movies. Now, on this show, in the past, we have covered a number of what we like to call suckwals, basically sequels that don't live up to the high bar that was set by its predecessor. Sometimes, however, there are still diamonds in the rough to find in these films, despite you never even knowing that they actually existed in the first place. That's what we're dealing with today, because we are dealing with Creepshow 3, a film I will admit I did not know existed until it was brought forth by our good friend Philip from the Adapted to Screen podcast. Philip, welcome back to the show. How are you doing, man?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you, Jason. Yourself?
I am really, really good. Now, aside from being our seemingly go-to horror guy these days, when you mentioned this film, I'm not going to lie, I'm like, oh, dear God, they made a third. And I remember watching, like, especially the second Creepshow. The second Creepshow personally was my favorite. I guess it's the one that, I had access to the most growing up. But what is it about this film that made you want to put it forth?
I think because it's universally panned and everyone hates it, and there's things in it that are very good, and I think sometimes you just need to see past your anger of it's not like the first two and just get on board and enjoy it.
And I think with the anthology genre, you can do that because, of course, not everything, even in the same movie, not everything is supposed to be tied together. But there is some actual clever writing in this one. And, maybe not in the dialogue section, but there is some clever plotting at least. But before we get into that, it is time to take this horror threequel and trailerize it.
5 Tales of Horror. Set in one discount Hollywood generic town lot. 5 tries at actually telling a scary story, or even a mildly amusing one. Enter Creepshow 3, a sequel without the original creators, without recognizable actors, without a proper CGI budget, and without the wit and style of the first 2 films. In a sequel that no one asked for, wrap your head around the biggest question that this film poses. Did anyone actually ever find these scripts scary? The third time tries charmingly hard to be good in Creepshow 3. Rated R for really not that scary.
Very good.
Now, I have to admit, like, I am doing my research and watching this, I'm like, I know no one in this. Normally, in the first 2 Creepshow films, there was, at least a face that either went on to do something really good, or a face that has been around long enough. And of course, the 2 biggest names involved in the first 2 films were, of course, George Romero and Stephen King. You get none of that here.
No, you get mega budget.
Exactly. It's like the Kirkland brand version of a Creepshow film, but without Romero and King's involvement. Does it still matter? Should it even have the Creepshow name on it?
Well, we've had that conversation before, haven't we? Especially when it comes to Halloween 3, should it actually have the Creepshow name on it? I think, if you look back at Creepshow 1, you had Leslie Nielsen and Ted Danson, even Stephen King in the first Creepshow film, and in the second, I think George Kennedy was in. I'm pretty sure he was. I think he was in the Tobacco Indian sketch. So there was, and at the same time, everyone in those films were decent actors. the state of the acting. Actually, I've made some notes, but the state of the acting was close to shocking, to be perfectly honest. And they could have done it lots of different ways, which we'll talk about later. But actually, the one note that I'd made was, did the director win the rights to the Creepshow name in a game of cards? Because that's kind of what it seems like.
It does feel like a pickup at a garage sale and then you know, basically turned it into a student film, because there were a lot of actors where this is, you know, if not their first, one of their earlier roles, and really afterwards they didn't go on to do much. But let's get through the list here. The film stars Stephanie Petty, AJ Brown, Alina Madison, Camille Lacey, Ryan Carty, Emmett McGuire, Bo Kresick, April Wade, and many more. Names that I have never encountered in a single other production. I mean, I know some of them did go on to do some more horror films. I think, if I remember correctly, Camille Lacey was in one of those fan-made Star Trek series that's out there. Indeed, for an episode, but really nothing you're going to recognize. Same thing with the writer and directors. It was written and directed by Anna Clavell and James Duddleson, with the stories written by other people. Again, not George Romero, not Stephen King. And I mean, Anna Clavell and James Duddleson do have a history of working together. I don't know their partnership or whatever, but it's one of those things where it's like it's discount horror, and they happen to be okay at it. The film, according to Wikipedia, had a budget of about $3.5 million and no listed box office because it went straight to video. Released in 2006, it's almost 20 years to the day when Creepshow 2 came out back in 1987. Over on Rotten Tomatoes, it has an audience score of 11%.
That's generous.
There is no official tomatometer listed because it only has 6 reviews. So I went through it, did some math, got my calculator, you know, yay, school. Apparently, if you go through the ratings that are listed, it has an aggregate score of 22 of those 6 reviews, but I'm sure it's in reality probably going to end up being much lower if anyone goes and actually reviews it. However, we have to get in, rather than go through actor by actor, because really, you know, these are brand new faces. And because it's an anthology series, much like we did with Movie 43, we're going to take this story by story. Now, there are 5 stories in this, but there's also an epilogue and kind of like a prologue, if you will. And let's start with that animated prologue of the hot dog vendor killing a dog and then selling the dogs. I personally found the animation style kind of cool in this one, almost like an indie horror game, Five Nights at Freddy's kind of feel to it. What did you think about the animated intro?
Yeah, no, I thought it was quite. I mean, it's interesting that you said. I like the fact that you do all the research, because I'd written down that the budget must have been quite good, because everything come across as good, other than some of the acting, if you know what I mean. Obviously, they didn't really pay much for the script or the script writers, and the actors were just doing what they could do. But the actual sets and the design and the costumes and the props were all, and the animation was all quite good. And I was like, so they've actually spent some money on this somewhere. There is money there somewhere. But yeah, I enjoyed the animation. I thought it was a nice way to kick in. Mm-hmm. You know, everyone likes a bit of animation before a film starts, surely, you know what I mean? I
mean, the fact that it's short, right? It conveys definitely a spooky tone to it. It's a cool animation style. It reminds me of, and the fact that there's no dialogue in it either almost adds to the creepiness of it. It reminds me of, if you watch on Amazon Prime, The Boys put out a short animated series almost in a Looney Tunes-esque style called Diabolical, and it's a ton of fun. Like, it's gross and wrong in all the right ways, and it just kind of adds to that kind of setting. This, I think, set the tone very well. However, we have to now get to the first story because it leads into the story of Alice. How was
I say just before you do move into that story, I think if I remember correctly, I think Creepshow 2 had that animation that ran all the way through, didn't it? Was it the boy who got the box from the post office? And it was the Venus flytrap, was it? If I remember correctly. So it's probably playing a bit of homage to the second film as well, to kind of settle you in, lure you in.
And that's one of the things that's different from this one. In the first two Creepshow films, the stories kind of all started from comic book images and then kind of segued into the live action. Here, they used this sort of, comic bookization, if you will, of a pan or like the end scene of the story to transition to the next one. This does kind of pay somewhat homage to that, although you're going to find the comic book beginnings of the stories missing a little bit. But let's get to the first story of Alice. How was this story, this section of the film for you?
Well, I thought it was, because I've had a little think, and I think each story had a kind of a moral tale to it, if you know what I mean. So they were kind of building up to the moral rather than the moral being in the story. And I think it was very much of its time. You've got Alice, who's a popular girl at school, hasn't got time for anyone, so on and so forth. But I actually enjoyed it, and I'm glad it was only about 5 or 6 minutes long. It couldn't have been any much longer than that, in all fairness. But no, I actually quite enjoyed this bit. I thought it was a good take on the remote control.
I will give Stephanie Petty all kudos. You're not supposed to like Alice. Alice is supposed to be a failed, flawed person. And when someone, comes on screen and you instantly dislike that character, that actor's actually done a decent job. And you're right, the idea of the remote control changing their reality and the fact that Alice was kind of reliving the same scene, but whether it's, change the color, change the language, like that part makes sense. But what was never really addressed until very kind of sort of briefly later on is every time the remote control is used, part of her body is all of a sudden covered in boils and blisters, and it doesn't really get addressed until this scene near the end where she's running out completely covered in boils and blisters like a horror movie practice session at a college class for movie prosthetics. And finally the professor, the guy who makes this this remote control, said, well, this is who you really are, and then changes her into a bunny. I don't know, the problem is it's never really addressed. Her hand is basically mummified with boils, and at no point is she like, oh, well, that's just it. She just kind of works with it. It's just there. There's a lot that's not explained. I do agree that it's a good length for the starter story, because I don't know if you could go much further with it. It did feel a little, almost like Extreme Goosebumps-esque to me. It seemed a little light.
Well, I think possibly what the writer / director was trying to do was put the trust in the audience that this is going to pay off. Because if you're watching it, you're going, what the hell am I watching? This is madness. And am I being set up for another hour and 35 minutes of madness? But actually, it's the professor who's the integral part throughout the whole of the story, where in normal creep shows you have your 20-minute, 30-minute story and it just moves on to a different story. And all of these stories are linked. And that's one of the things that I liked about it, is because you know all the characters and you get to know the characters as the time goes. And you see little different, like for instance, in the stripper segment, she talks to those chaps, but those chaps are going to see the professor, and you learn more about the professor as you go along, even though you're not expecting to, if you see what I mean.
And that's the thing, as you're going on and you all of a sudden, make the connection that all of these stories are connected into the same town and kind of connected to the same people. it becomes a clever thing, how they're able to, have almost anchor points in different stories as you're passing through. And you're right. I think from a writing perspective, that way of tying all the anthology stories together is, to me, much more clever than the first two Creepshows, even if the acting and the creepiness or horror-esque-ness of the stories don't necessarily match up.
Oh, yeah, of course. And I think, again, if you called it, for instance, One Night in Smallville or One Night in Texasville or whatever, because it's all set in the same kind of town, then you'd get away with it a little bit more than Creepshow 3.
Yeah, I if I remember correctly in my research, I think there's something in one of the scenes where it identifies the town as Creepville or something like that. So, basically, come up with a better town name. But
indeed,
but I do like the idea of a town being tormented through whatever reason or whatever cause has caused all these things to happen in this town. Creepshow 3 makes the case for an anthology Black Mirror style series all set in one town, but I don't think the Creepshow name should be attached to it. I think you're right on that one.
Yeah, most definitely. And have you ever seen Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch?
I have.
Okay, cool. So they were hour and a half long episodes. They weren't movies. They weren't billed as a TV movie. It was in England. It was Sherlock's on, and that was that. And they were kind of independent stories, but with a continuation throughout them that kept you hooked as you went along. And this could have been a little bit like that. They could have done, like, especially with the radio, that could have been an hour on its own and been very interesting. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? There's certain bits in this that would have done really well being a standout and having a 3-part, I suppose, I don't know whether you guys have them in Canada or not, but you have like a mini series. So you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 9 o'clock till 10 o'clock. It's Creepshow 3, and you just do it that way. But what do I know?
Well, I mean, they've taken the Creepshow brand and put it onto Shudder now, and I think that's actually as a series. So clearly, the idea was there. But I mean,
they've got 24 episodes, haven't they? I haven't got access to Shudder because I just wouldn't watch enough of it to warrant paying for the subscription. But and they seem to have some really good actors in that as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think because it's got a streaming service behind it, because there's a decent amount of money that these streaming services are putting into their productions, because they want them to be good. They have to be good for people to sign up to the service. Not everyone's going to sign up for, rando retro 80s horror film with actors you barely remember. You need to have good content.
No, I would definitely. If there was like, for instance, if PM Entertainment put their back catalogue out and charge like 20 quid a month, I'd be subscribing to that.
but that's where you have services like what they're called fast services, free ad supported television, things like Tubi and Plex and FilmRise.
Pluto TV. That's one we've got over here. That's very good, actually.
Oh, we've got it here too, and because they partnered with Chorus Television here, so Pluto TV, and again, it's good. There's some good stuff on there. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of binged the Transformers channel when it popped on, because of course my kid, one of my sons is into Transformers, and I was a Transformers kid growing up. But the thing is, if you're the thing with Tubi and channel and fast services like that is that they're free. Right? So it's a no-brainer to download them and pop on there every now and then and see what they've got. And you're like, oh, occasionally you find a diamond in the rough, and occasionally you find a few stinkers. It's not, but you didn't put any money into it, so it's okay. With Shudder, they, like Netflix and Disney Plus and Prime and Paramount Plus and then all the ones you got to pay for,
You've got to make it worth your while, haven't you?
Well, exactly. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I would, happily watch any of the BritBox TV shows. And if there was or even Acorn TV, and if there was an ad-supported free version, sign me up. But there's only so many streaming services that one can pay for.
I've got to say, that BritBox has got to be the biggest scam I have ever seen in my whole life. Especially for British people, because you're like, well, we can just watch this on like ITV3. You know what I mean? Why on earth are we paying to watch stuff we've already seen?
See, I think BritBox works better for us, in Canada and the US, because we don't necessarily have access to all of those shows. Although I got to tell you, I got my Roku TV, and I've been watching those classic Doctor Who episodes because I grew up in the Tom Baker era. So there's that.
I think the best thing that they've got on BritBox is Euphoria. I think that's what it's called. I don't know whether you've ever seen that or not.
This isn't the one with Zendaya that's done by HBO.
No, Utopia. Not Euphoria, Utopia.
Ah, yes.
TV series from 2013, which kind of, it's 10 years later. Everyone went through the pandemic. You're like, so everyone knew it was coming. That's it. But I think that's on BritBox, and it's like, I want to watch that again, but I ain't paying the money.
Well, it's funny because you've got Utopia, and then you had Prime Video that kind of redid Utopia for the North American audience, which, for the record, people, just watch the British version. It's always going to be better. Like, I remember watching Broadchurch when it came out. And then, they made Grace Point or whatever it was for the U.S. market with David Tennant in the same role with a bad American accent. And I'm just like, no. Broadchurch. Just watch Broadchurch. Just watch the British version.
Well, nothing can be as worse as the American version of Fawlty Towers.
Wait, there was an American version of Fawlty Towers?
Oh my dear God, have you never seen it? I think it was called like Major Pain or something. I know that's a movie, but because like the guy was called Major, and it was majorly.
Oh, I'm sorry. You cannot beat Fawlty Towers. Absolutely love that show.
No, but they tried to remake it, and it was dreadful.
There's a podcast waiting to happen there, adapted to North America. That's what it needs to happen now. Yes. Oh, dear God. Okay.
Oh, no, that's it. No, that's it. It was called Pain, Payne, but the guy was Major, so he was Major Pain.
Oh, dear God.
It was dreadful.
Next on Adapted to North America. Let's move on to the radio. And I'm not going to lie, this is the story where I'm like, Alice was okay, but had that Goosebumps, maybe Electric Dreams kind of feel to it, where it seemed very, for lack of, a better term, and for lack of the boils on all over Alice, it seemed kind of sanitized for a Creepshow film. The radio is when it got to be really creepy and actually, I think, really well done.
Oh, indeed, yeah. This is, I think, if you've seen all the Creepshows, there's always one or two that you will always remember. And I think, like for Creepshow 1, I always remember the Ted Danson one, just, because he was buried up to his neck in the sand, and I couldn't remember much of the story, but I remember that. And then obviously in the second one, I remember the swamp. That was always my favourite. It was the swamp, or when there's on the raft and that blob gets them, if you remember that one.
The raft is the one that stands out for me on Creepshow too.
Yeah, so you remember that. And this one was the one I always remembered, the radio, because it had so much potential, and it was clearly the longest segment in the film as well. And he could have done so much more with it. But I think the acting was the best in this segment. The acting, other than the police officer, that was really weird. But the acting was the best, and just the payoff wasn't good enough, really.
I mean, as I'm watching this, and you can see where there's probably zero connection with the actual creation of the film, but you can see where the idea of being guided by a voice, is part and parcel to kind of the movie Her. if I remember correctly, it's Joaquin Phoenix and the voice of Scarlett Johansson. And then basically what would happen if Amazon Alexa got mixed up with AI. But I do like that it's this mysterious radio bought on the street, and it has a sentience and it has almost an omnipotence about it too, and you're not quite sure if it's in his head, or the fact that other people hear it means definitely not just in his head, but it's cool.
You're thinking far too much into it, really. It's the voice coming out the radio, Jason.
Right.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah, it's not in his head. It's coming out of the radio.
Yeah, because other people can hear it. But, it's one of those things where you sit there and say, this is a really cool setup, right? Maybe the payoff isn't as good as you wanted it to be, but I like the fact that it's the bigger radio that he passed on, that ended up being his undoing by being bought by the pimp. So, and the fact that the radio always knows, and the radio seems to be playing all sides, it's very, very cool. And, it's a simple plot device. It's simple to film. You don't need to rely on bad CGI. You don't need to. All you need to rely on is a radio that's got red and green lights on it, and that's about it. I really liked this one.
Oh yeah, me too. And I think it's and again, just what I was talking about earlier about the writer and the director wanting the audience just to have, or trusting the audience enough to understand what was going on, or at least later on, because obviously this film is about the professor who makes all these weird and wonderful shit that's affecting everyone's life. Mm-hmm. And obviously it's the professor who makes the radios, and you find that out later on when he's talking to the guy who's selling them. But yeah, no, I liked it. I thought it was good. Again, like you said, it was creepy. It was a bit dirty and dingy, but it's very difficult to get that kind of dirty and dingy feel without spending a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And like you said, the budget was £3.5 million. And maybe this, again, maybe I remember this because I quite fancied that bird. And I was like, oh yeah, she's a bit of all right. but it was, it didn't linger. It was kind of like when he went and got the money, like she got him to steal the money, and she was like, that man saw your money. He's going to come back. And within a few seconds, he's there trying to get in the house to steal the money. So it was very quick. It didn't linger. It didn't take him an hour and a half to figure out that the radio is really talking to him. He just accepted the fact, which is always good because you want things to move on. But I really enjoyed this segment. I thought it was probably the best out of all of them.
The only thing I would say, and you would need a little bit more time for this, but not much more, I don't think, is the motivation for Jerry to go and follow basically this radio's instructions. We know he lacks confidence. We know he's alone. We know he's down on his luck and buried into the bottle of whatever the hell he's drinking. The radio just seems to tell him what to do. It would have been more interesting if the radio tried to basically, convince him to do it. Like, he just does these things, on the will of the radio, which, okay, if my radio starts talking to me and tells me exactly what I want and need, then maybe I'm going to believe it. But the radio didn't have to convince him at all, and it would have been interesting to see what it took to what was Jerry's motivation in all of it.
Yeah, but I think she kind of did a little bit when she went like, right, you want to get out of here, you want to get some money, I'll show you where some money is. Mm-hmm. And so he's probably gone, oh, well, what have I got to lose? Okay, what, show me, and if there's nothing there, then forget it. But actually, she took him to £500,000, so it's like, okay. And but then it's all of those things that you've just said about his personality. When he's got the sniff of a bit of a bird, he's like, well, yeah, I'll have a bit of that. And the radio's going, get rid of her. And he's not listening because he's thinking from the other end of his body. And that was his downfall. And if he just would have listened to the radio, he'd be living the life of Riley. But I don't know whether you, just when you're talking then about AIs and stuff like that, there's a lot of TV now that kind of not used this particularly, but if you've ever seen Person of Interest, it's very much, there's an automated being telling people what to do, and there's other automated beings telling other people what to do, and it just becomes that kind of circle of you get an email going, here's some money, go and do this, and you go and do it, and someone else gets the same email, go and do that, and there's this actual idea is very, very good, although maybe poorly executed in a poor film.
It definitely was, one of the better stories in it, and I think it on its own, if given the space, and again in an anthology series, like if you gave this the proper 48 minutes or an hour long kind of Black Mirror length kind of episode, you could put a little bit more nuance and multi-layered relationship between Jerry and the radio into it, but for the short amount of time, I think they did the best that they could.
Oh yeah, 100%. But yeah, you're right. I mean, this is a standalone episode, like a Black Mirror episode, and just like you were saying, the radio could be in different radios, getting different people to do different things at the same time, and then the radio picking their favourite. So which one listens to me the most? Well, I'm going to make sure he comes up on top, so to speak.
Let's move on to the call girl. You had mentioned this one before as well. This one was another decent story. I have some notes. But how was the call girl for you?
Well, my first note is I remember why I thought this film was good, because of the chick. There was double chicks. So there's one nice hot blonde chick and then another one, and that's probably why I thought it was better than what people thought. But I thought there was a good twist in the story, and again it ties the story to this is where the story starts to tie together, especially with the guys outside the professor's house. But no, I enjoyed it. I think the only bit that I would say kind of let it down was the reveal of the dead people in the house. That wasn't necessary. They could have done that at the very end.
That is literally the exact note I wanted to bring up, because again, you have this, villain falls into the trap of another villain that they're not quite sure. There's enough about Ryan Carty's character in this that gives him the creep factor. You didn't need to, open the curtain and reveal, the bad guyness until, like, this is something that she should have discovered herself. Like when she comes into the shower and she hears the voice, maybe she goes through the house kind of thing and then sees the bodies, and then Ryan Carty comes up with the chewy monster face on. Like, let her discover that she's the one that's fallen into the trap rather than vice versa. Don't spoil it for us. Be subtle.
Yeah, and that would have been easily done. Wouldn't have cost you anything, and would have been a better payoff. Yeah,
I mean, it's a simple enough plot, and it got the exact amount of time that it needed. That's the only thing. It is literally the only, like, the fact that he's not in any of the pictures, right? And he tries to write it off as the, that's all you need. That's it.
Yeah, because I mean, as I said, I'd only ever seen it once before, more or less when it first came out. But I was thinking, is he a burglar? Is he just, noticed they've gone on holiday and he's just like robbed the house? And so I was still unsure until I was like, oh, I remember now, which was cool. And you didn't really need to know her motivation particularly. But again, I think that was just a filler, just to connect the professor to what was going on. I mean, to be fair, the demon face, that was out of the blue particularly, because it was never really mentioned again.
It was, though, in the haunted dog episode when he goes to the party and Ryan Carty is there, and then
but he wasn't there. Oh, were they all monsters then? Am I remembering this?
There was a party of monsters going on there.
That's right. Yes, of course. Yeah. But there was no kind of like, in the news, someone's been eaten to death. There was no real connection to anything else, so to speak, other than characters mingling with each other, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I mean, when they did the body reveal, as on their way to the bedroom, I'm like, oh, this is it's a To Catch a Killer kind of thing, and he's trying to set her up, because we know he killed them. That's fine. I'm like, okay, he's going to set her up to be the killer from there. Doesn't really, but like, he's a demon. Like, if you don't show the reveal of the dead family hanging up, it's an infinitely better story. It's literally one note. You take out one scene, it's one note.
Exactly, yeah. You just put it at the end, not in the middle.
Exactly.
And you're good.
This is why editors are important. Editors will see that and go, no. Just delete that scene. I bet you anything. You could take this film, do a director's cut or an editor's cut, trim out some of the parts that don't need to be there, and it's a much better film.
Oh, you see, right now we should start our own company called Hindsight Productions, and that's just go back on things that have already been done and just change them.
Right? Hindsight Productions now also produces the podcast adapted to North America.
Indeed.
Let's move on to The Professor's Wife. I'm going to let you take the floor on this one because I got notes.
Okay, cool. Well, I've actually only got one note really, which was silly but interesting with a good payoff. And the payoff is more at the very end of the film. But I think this is where this is the part of the film now where the filmmakers are saying to the audience, this is what the film's all about. This is the professor. You might have seen him 2 or 3 times already. You might have heard about his inventions, which you have a couple of times, well, at least once. You've seen him turn someone into a rabbit and everyone's forgotten. And then you've got these two guys who really goes back to their old teacher's house and go, oh, you're such a great guy, this, that, the other. But yeah, no, this is, again, silly but interesting. And that's really all I've got to say about that.
It was, if I'm being honest here, and maybe it's because of the first 2 Creepshow films, which, you were allowed to have a little bit of wit, but nothing in the first 2 Creepshow films, if memory serves, was outright comedic. It was,
no, you're right.
Maybe
it was more serious. This is very, very, like, I think like saying like Goosebumps, it's silly, but that's why I said it's silly.
Yeah, this one, while the payoff was good, and I like the direction of the story, maybe it's just the actors, right?
Oh yeah.
The 2 students that end up chopping up the girl. By the way, Creepshow 3 spoilers. If you haven't figured it, if you don't know this podcast by now, I'm sorry. We're just gonna put it's not that bad. # spoilers. But as they're pulling up body parts and they're just so seemingly happy about it, it's like it felt like a bad comedy. It felt like sketch com.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, the one thing I was kind of disappointed about is like they obviously presume she was a robot. There's lots of different ways to find out if she's a robot than chopping up all of her, chopping her up. You know what I mean? There's just lots of different ways to figure it out rather than just kill someone. And I think maybe the first time, if you hit them over the head or chopped off an arm, you'd probably start to feel a bit sick.
Mm-hmm. I can safely say I have never chopped up a full body before, but I'm pretty darn skippy. You don't need to chop up the whole thing to figure out that your thesis was wrong in this one.
Indeed, yes. Indeed.
But it was just played for jokes. It felt like if it was said that the teacher would challenge their students with these, not necessarily pranks, but like scenarios where you have to work your way through it. And, they felt like this was like one more challenge from their mentor, their favorite professor. If it wasn't played for just almost slapstick jokes, then I think it could have been a bit more, for lack of a better term, creepy. And I do recognize the need sometimes for movies to have a comedic beat, a breath, if you will. But it did. This felt like some kind of, Big Truck Kids in the Hall kind of comedic sketch com.
Yeah, I mean, I think possibly I think maybe they were like, right, we've got another 5 minutes. What are we going to do? Oh, just do that. Just kind of how do we get to our end goal? Let's do it really quickly and not worry too much about it because we've got the radio. That's the only thing I could think of really, because it was kind of it was unnecessary in a way, and especially like the lengths they went to was and like you say, playing for laughs. Yeah, I just think it was an afterthought, to be perfectly honest.
I mean, I think the other thing too is following the radio and the call girl. While it may be a decent spot for a comedic beat, it puts the brakes on the truck, really.
Yes, because you've got to get back into, should we say, more serious storytelling, so to speak. So yeah, it was probably the wrong thing to do. But then again, they made the whole film, so I will say I'm glad it wasn't the last story, because if that was your lasting impression or your denouement for the film, then it would be like, well, why? But indeed, yes.
Yeah, but no, for that we get the haunted dog. How was this one for you?
You've said the haunted dog now. Oh yes, of course, because I've just got the doctor. Right, so I liked it. So what I liked about it is that they made you really dislike the Doctor, like really dislike him. Normally in a film, you'd, especially in the late 80s, someone had to be a mad rapist for you to rape someone. To go, this man is unlikable. Look what he's just done. Whereas this guy's just a complete knobhead, and you're just sitting there going, I can't wait for you to get your just desserts. I just can't wait. But again, I think the payoff wasn't good enough. He needed to explode, I think.
Yeah, he seemed to kind of get off a little bit easy with just having the heart attack. Of course, with all the drugs that he's taking, I'm surprised it didn't happen earlier. Of
course. I actually thought it was a decent... I thought he acted it as... If his acting was... If the script is a 1, he was acting at like a 6 or a 7. He was going hard. So, with what he had to work with, he was doing very well, especially those little bits when he's talking to the patients, and she's like, I've hurt my wrist. He goes, right, take your clothes off. I just thought that was really funny. You could clearly, he just must be ad-libbing stuff just for a laugh, entertaining himself. So I enjoyed this section for what it was. It was decent enough, and you could tell that it was elevating the actual script.
I will say, and we've talked a little bit about, the call girl needing to be a little bit more subtle, and the radio maybe needing a little bit more space to be able to develop that relationship between the radio and Jerry. Here, I think it plays at the perfect length where, we get hammered for about 15 minutes that Dr. Farwell he's an asshole. And he's quite the asshole, because everyone he deals with in the most assholish way. And there's zero redemption for this guy. Oh, yeah.
Massively. Yeah.
And as with all good horror films, you want the complete asshole to get their comeuppance. But I think you're right. I think it's one of those things where the payoff needed to be a bit more. He basically had heart failure from all the, visions that he's having of the guy that died from the hot dog that he fed, the bad dog. I get it. And I think they did well enough in putting decent people around him to make him seem even more like an asshole. Specifically April Wade, who played the nurse in this walk-in facility.
Yeah, she was good.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the Dusty Rhodes girl at the end who has the brain tumor, and he's just very dismissive of like, yeah, you're pretty much going to die. And, senior prom? No? Okay. Get someone to take you to a senior prom, right? Also, all wrestling fans around the world are going, Dusty Rhodes? Really?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, no, I enjoyed that.
But, you're right. You want the comeuppance to be worth it, not just have a heart attack from a vision. Like, and especially considering how, for lack of a better term, gory this film is, even though the gore is, we're not talking, straight up slasher horror film kind of gore. It's very, I'm surprised this film is rated R. I'm not going to lie. It's a little PG for me, but I'm also a sick bastard, but, this feels tame in comparison to everything else we've seen so far.
Oh, yes, 100%. But I think you probably need that, especially after that. And that's the whole point, that professor bit. It was, you had the radio, you had the stripper, then you've got that kind of daft goofiness. And then the doctor one, it was, as I said, if he would have, I don't know, got, say, hit by a garbage truck and exploded or something, that would have made it maybe a competitor to the radio to be the best one of the lot, because that's what you want. You want him dead. You want him dead, and you want him dead badly.
I'm not. I get he dies from a heart attack from the visions. I would have preferred to see him die from a hot dog related incident, whether he's backed over by the truck, by being so scared by the vision that he walks out in the street and he gets hit by a hot dog vending truck, whether he himself chokes on a hot dog, like some kind of, moral circle completion that ends him, rather than just has a heart attack from all the drugs he's taken and having visions. Just.
Yeah, of course. But obviously, in between all this, you've got him going to these. I would have guessed it was a sex party with the demons that he clearly didn't know were demons. Because he goes, "Who you brought? No one. Well, you know what it's like. You've got to bring someone new because we've got to eat them." But like, obviously, whether he knew that he didn't know they were demons, and he probably got lucky that he wasn't eaten by the demon. And that's the point I was making earlier, was the guy didn't need to be a demon, because that scene doesn't need, that scene doesn't need to be in, it didn't make the film any better.
I'm just going to hypothesize a potential ending that I think would have fit in this scenario. So he goes to the party with the demons, and he's always bringing like the bags of drugs and all that kind of stuff, right? Because you got to bring snacks, you got to bring something, right? Mm-hmm. What if he gets kicked out of the walk-in clinic, so he no longer has access to the drugs that he brings to the party? He goes to the party. We know they're demons. He doesn't bring any snacks. They're like, well, no, you did bring snacks. They kill him, turn him into hot dogs. All of a sudden, you have that moral circle, and those hot dogs are the ones that are sold at the, there.
Well, Hindsight Productions proudly introduces to you.
Also, if that's the thought that just came into my mind, I am one sick bastard. So sorry, not sorry.
I know that would be a much more fitting ending than dying from a hallucination.
If the people who wrote that story are listening to this podcast, you're welcome. Go redo it. Go director's cut. Okay, so we talked about the interconnectedness of this, and we talked about how it's maybe not stop with some of these ones. I'm going to put this in your wheelhouse here. We've got the 5 stories, right? We'll keep the epilogue as where it is, which I want to talk about the epilogue in a second here, and we'll keep the opening animation intro where it is. If you had the opportunity to reorder any of the 5 stories and put them in a different order in the film, would you? No, because they're perfect the way they are. Although I probably wouldn't have. I would change the professor bit, and I would have just not had. I would have maybe not. Well, actually, what I would have done is not have them chop up the woman. I would have had it that maybe she killed them, and then at the end they're there at the wedding. Perhaps that's the only thing I'd possibly change. Maybe not chop her up, but start to and have the professor kind of come in halfway through. And all of a sudden be like, what the hell are you doing? Right? Like,
well, yeah, I mean, maybe we could have seen ways that they were trying to find out if she was a robot. Maybe they tried to short circuit her by electrocuting her or something, to start with, perhaps, rather than, but the ending, again, the payoff's there at the end. So I wouldn't mess about with it too much, but no, I would keep that in exactly the right order, because you have to. Because if you take it out of order, then it doesn't make any sense. Not that it makes any sense anyway, but I would keep it in exactly the same order.
I think for me, the only thing is that Alice seemed like a weaker start. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. My whole theory with these anthology series is that you want to start strong and you want to end strong. So, I mean, I would definitely change the ending of The Haunted Dog, but I still think you can end on The Haunted Dog. Mm-hmm. I think you could flip-flop the radio and Alice and just give a breath in between the radio and the call girl.
Yes, you can do that. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that's the only thing I would change. But we need to talk about this epilogue here.
Yeah, man.
Right. Which is okay. It goes back into the campiness where he's, basically duct tape Weekend at Bernie's his wife, and does get to have a marriage. And then we get to see some of the other characters. Like we see the wife from the family from Alice is still thinking that they have a daughter named Alice, which that's never really explained, but then
it's the power of the remote control, you see, Jason.
Mm-hmm. Well, clearly they didn't put her brain on mute or whatever. But then they do like this big truck or camera truck over back to the hot dog vendor, who all of a sudden takes off the hat, and we see that it's like it's the Creepshow guy with the worst freaking CGI I've seen in a film in a long time.
Like, that spent all their money, unfortunately.
Yeah, like I'm watching this, and I would have been fine if it was just like the Creepshow guy, like with makeup and whatever. But no, they have to do this really horrible CGI that makes the Lawnmower Man look good.
It was still better than the end of Blade.
Oh. So many good films with so many bad CGI moments. Like, if you didn't know what you were looking at, you would sit there going, well, what the hell is this? No wonder the guy died from the hot dog kind of thing. But it was almost needless. It was almost like you almost needed something else, where it's the hot dog guys maybe going to another town. Right?
Yes, and starting all over again.
Exactly. Like, you don't need to use bad CGI in this case to have like almost a shock type ending. It just got back to the campiness of it. I see what they were trying to do, maybe, but that part flopped. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh no! Again, and I think it was kind of the same thing with the professor bit. It's what we're going to do here. Just do that. Yeah. Doesn't make a difference. Just get it done. And yeah, things could have been done a little differently. But I think, like for instance, what they could have shown maybe is the professor setting up home in a new town or something. Because again, all of this, the radio, not the stripper particularly, but obviously the professor bit, the doctor bit, it all surrounds really. It all surrounds all of the professor's inventions, so to speak. So maybe he sets up in another new town, and then it can begin again, just like you said about with the hot dog vendor setting up and starting again. But actually, it could just have been the professor setting up and starting again. But we don't know that because he's somehow managed to put his dead wife back together. So what else can he actually do? Which was what I like to remember about the film rather than the really rubbish ending.
You mentioned something here, and it kind of actually almost ruins the movie for me. Because you're mentioning that, in your opinion from watching this film, the Professor Dayton is, basically the linchpin for everything that's kind of happening. He's the one that made the remote control that turned Alice into the bunny. He's the one that's made the radios that became the radio. We don't know how he's involved with the demon, but somehow that's there kind of thing.
Well, he puts people back together, so maybe he created those demons himself.
It's quite possible. But then to end on the hot dog vendor implies that the hot dog vendor is the linchpin for everything.
Yeah, true.
And
very true.
There are, like, even in the radio, I think there's a pamphlet for the hot dog vendor in his kitchen, as I recall. So, by really, it's a lot more subtle. So if you're leaving the film thinking that the professor is the center of everything, and really it's the hot dog vendor, the professor leaving in the hot dog vendor revealing his true self at the same time, it counters who the true villain is, or who the true catalyst of everything going wrong in Creepville happening.
That's very true, Jason.
And maybe I'm just thinking way too much about Creepshow 3.
I think, to be honest, you did that at the very start, didn't you? You started to really, you went a bit hard there. So maybe it was just a case of, we've got nothing for the end. What should we do?
I maybe showed my cards a little early. I'm not going to lie. Okay, so given the nature of this film, we're not going to pick an MVP actor, because none of the actors really got the amount of screen time needed in order to be able to do it. But I will, if you do have an MVP actor, please name them. But I'm going to ask you, Philip, it's time to pick your MVP story out of this.
Oh, the radio. All day, every day.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think the radio is definitely the best story out of the lot. And the one I think that could have translated into its own movie. You could very easily turn that story alone into a feature-length film. Although I did want to give a shout out on the acting side to April Wade. She played the nurse in the Haunted Dog episode that is almost the antithesis to just how bad a person Dr. Farwell is. So, kudos to April Wade. But now, is there anyone that stood out for you in this?
The voice of the radio.
Okay.
I'm joking. No. In seriousness, I thought the chap who was in, I don't remember the chap's name, the chap in the radio. I thought he was good, because I thought he played the down on your luck kind of guy quite well. And the doctor, I thought the doctor was actually really, I thought that actor really elevated the material that he had, considering that probably everyone had the same writer, or at least had the same type of material. He did very well with what he had, and I actually enjoyed his performance.
So for the record, that's A.J. Bowen, who played Jerry in the radio, and the voice of the radio was Kara Cameron. And I'm not going to lie, I looked it up because Kara Cameron was actually on my short list of MVP actors for this. Ooh. Because it was one of those things where you take a look at the movie Her, right? And Scarlett Johansson's voice was very, very, it was a character unto itself. And I think Kara Cameron actually did a very good job of doing that in this film as well. So, again, kudos where kudos are warranted here. Philip, thank you so much for coming back to the show. Give us a second here. Let us know about the Adapted to Screen podcast, not Adapted to North America, Adapted to Screen, and where we can find you out there on the interwebs.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Yes, I have a podcast with my co-host, Richie, called Adapted to Screen. And what we do, we read a book or the source material, and then we check the differences between the movie. So we've done things like Madame Doubtfire versus Mrs. Doubtfire, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep versus Blade Runner. And we just discussed the differences between the print and what's on screen. We're currently on a little season break, but we're coming back in the next 2 or 3 weeks with Nothing Lasts Forever, which of course is the source material for Die Hard, and First Blood, which is the source material for, surprise, surprise, First Blood. And you can find us on all of the podcast places, so like Spotify, Good Pods, Apple, all of those different places you can find us.
I'm not going to lie. It was a long time before I discovered that First Blood was based on a book. Probably because I watched Rambo 2 before I watched First Blood. So that's just me, right? But It is a very, very good podcast. If you have not had a chance to listen to it, please do, by all means, go check out the Adapted to Screen podcast. And to you, our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of It's Not That Bad. Now, you guys know the drill. If there is a film out there that you think is unfairly maligned or is just so bad that there's no way in hell that we can find anything good to say about it, hit us up on Twitter at NotThatBadcast or go to our website at notthatbadcast.com. There you can find all of our back episodes, all of our episodes of There Can Only Be One, and you can go to our coming soon page and see some of the movies that are coming down the pipe for us. Until next time, Philip, thank you so much. I'm Jay. This is It's Not That Bad. Take care.
Hey folks, Stefan Shirazi and Renee Richardson here from the Metallica Report.
And we are proud members of the Pantheon podcast family, where the best of music and podcasts unite.
We've got something pretty cool for you. We're giving away an exclusive Metallica merch package worth over $250.
That's a whole lot of Scary Guys, Skulls, M72, and other sought-after Metallica swag. And we've made it easy for you to win. Follow and share the Metallica Report, and you're in the game. Go to pantheonpodcast.com/Metallica, enter your email, and hit that button to be entered to win.
And just like that, you're eligible for our monthly exclusive Metallica merch package.
And guess what, rockers? You can enter every month, so just do it. And while we love our global brothers and sisters, the lawyers won't let us ship outside the U.S.